me, I think the more urgent matter related to growth is the way we define growth. Because I think that some growth, properly defined and pursued, is essential to further reduce poverty and child mortality, disease, stabilize population, because those are among the conditions, including the education of girls, the empowerment of women, the availability of fertility management. These things are associated with a healthy improvement in economies. But the way we define growth now is functionally insane. The most common metric is GDP, gross domestic product, a metric that was devised in 1937 by a man named Simon Kuznets, who was honored for his achievement. And he spoke many times in the late 30s saying, please do not use GDP as a guide for economic policy. And he said that it's an advance, it was over what they had before, but it leaves out too many things. It doesn't measure pollution. It doesn't put any value on the impact of pollution. It does not measure the extraction and depletion of natural resources. It doesn't measure the distribution of income. Oh, what can students do? And is the move for sustainable campuses a good example of the kinds of things that students can do? Yes, absolutely. But also, you can be an advocate for sustainability in all the businesses around your campuses. If a student body has a strong enough feeling about sustainability, all of the businesses that depend upon purchases from the people who are part of a university community will get that message very quickly. Is it essential to have a global agreement in order to solve this crisis? My answer is yes. Business has been leading the way, and we've seen a lot of regional and local governments do good things, but ultimately this is a global challenge that must be met. And for all the changes in global governance, we still have the nation state as the primary unit of account. And nation states agreeing with one another represents the only model for a change in global policy. It's a global challenge, and it has to have a global solution. There was an American poet in the last century named Wallace Stevens, and he wrote these lines: after the last no comes a yes, and on that yes, the future world depends. There have been a lot of no's on climate, but after the last one, there's going to be a yes. In the movement to abolish slavery, there were a lot of no's before there was a yes. In the movement for women's rights, there were a lot of no's, but finally, there came a yes. We'll realize that years from now, those 18-year-olds who decided to help put a person on the moon, and today's 18-year-olds, will inherit a world in which they will ask one of two questions. If they live in a world with worse floods and droughts and climate refugees and rising seas and tropical diseases and failures of governance and chaos and despair, all of the things that the distinguished scientific community has tried to warn us about, if they inherited that kind of earth because of our inaction, they would be justified in looking back at us through the mists of time and asking, what were you thinking? How did you avoid looking at the truth? How did you paralyze yourself into inaction? Were you incapable of knowing the difference between right and wrong? But if they live in a world of renewal, with tens of millions of new jobs being created in solar and wind and sustainable agriculture and sustainable forestry and hyper-efficient business and investments in people's lives and families and healthcare, and a world that is moving in the right direction, with people who look at their own children and feel in their hearts that their lives are going to be better still, I want them to look back at us and ask another question. How did you find the moral courage to shake off the lethargy and the paralysis and rise up and do what was right? I like to believe that part of the answer to that question is going to be Sciences Po. Thank you very much.